Hello everybody and welcome back to another Triple Crown Wargaming video with me, the Oracle, and today, you've guessed it, it's another Old World reaction video. This is going to be coming out right off the back of the Old World Almanac release, showing off the combat phase. Now, for me, just as an overview, I was very pleased with everything that I'd seen and read in this article. I think it sounds really good, and I'm very excited to see how this is going to interact. Now, obviously, there's a few pieces in there, as usual, that we're going to want some confirmation on. We're going to want to see how those interact with the game and how, in general, those are going to work. But, from an initial overview, I'm very pleased with what we've seen. Now, like all the other phases, the combat phase is broken down into 4 sub-phases, which is, as we've come to expect. You've got the choose and fight sub-phase, calculate result, break test, and pursuit. So, my first initial thought on this is how will you calculate the sub phases? Are you going to do all at once? So you'd pick a combat. If you've got 2 combats, let's say, would you pick a combat and do choose combat, fight it, calculate result, break, flee, or pursue? Or would you do pick the first combat, fight it, pick the second combat, fight it, then calculate, would you do that? I think it's probably going to be similar to how it is in 8th edition, where you pick a unit, you complete all the sub-phases, and then you would pick the next unit. I think that's how it's going to be myself, but it'll be interesting to see if not. So those are the initial 4 sub-phases, which, they basically exist in Warhammer as it is anyway, just in a slightly different name or convention, which, it's not, that's cool to see, in my opinion. I'm glad that we've seen a return to those, and we've got a really well-structured combat phase, which is good. Now, something that has been confirmed here, which I think they'd been alluded to in previous articles and other things, is that only the first rank, otherwise known as the fighting rank, of an engaged unit can fight. So no more every unit can fight in 2 ranks or 3 ranks, dependent on items or war gear or rules. So that's quite a big change, especially with the changes to what we've seen so far with charging and stuff like that. I think that's going to be a relatively interesting change, and it'd be good to see how that's going to interact with the general pace of the game. Is that going to slow it down further? Which, from what we've already seen with things like charging and movement, I think that the game already seems like it's going to be slower than 8th. So I think it probably will probably slow down the game. But I think in general it also fits relatively well within the theme of the rest of what we've seen so far with rules. Now, they have mentioned that a unit with a wider fighting rank than its opponent can still attack with every model in that rank, to show that your troops surround and envelop the other regiment. Now, that obviously will give a buff to things where you used to have hoarded units. So, for example, if someone's 6 wide and you're 10 wide, you would still get to attack with all 10 people. But the attacks that are coming from non-base contact units can only ever hit once. They can't have multiple attacks. So if you've got Warriors of Chaos, for example, if Warriors have got 2 attacks still, if you're not in base contact, you're only hitting once. You're not hitting twice. So that does balance it out a little bit. And I think with the change to things like marching blocks and reforming to march, I think that balances the wider style of unit. So I don't think we're just going to see 10 wide, 15 wide units, because that's the best way to go. I think that there will be definitely some tactical drawbacks to that, and I think that it's going to be a balancing act of what is a good frontage compared to being able to manoeuvre and reform. So that is definitely interesting. Now, they have again made mention that some models may be able to make supporting attacks from deeper ranks. Multiple units engaged in the same combat, any model in base contact can only make 1 attack per turn. Now, multiple units in base contacts, I suppose, will be as it always was. If you've got flanks or if you've got rears, then all those guys get to attack in the same combat as well. So that's not changed. Good stuff. But it's going to be interesting to see what models can make supporting attacks from deeper ranks. Whether that's things like halberds or spears get the bonus rank, or whether certain rules, if we see a return to maybe something like martial prowess for the high elves, just as an example, in the old world, will that interact with making people fight in extra ranks? That's going to be quite cool to see as to how that's going to work. But I think in general, multiple charges or picking your charges carefully is what's going to be is what's going to be the most key in making sure that actually what you're throwing out there makes the most impact, shall we say. Now, they have confirmed again that the model with the highest initiative statistic goes first, and then so on down with the order. So that's the same as it was in 8th edition. If you're initiative 6 and your opponent's initiative 4, then the initiative 6 model is going first. Now, they have said that there's a bonus for charging and a bigger bonus for hitting in the flank or rear. Now, that feels very good. That, to me, I think that's a welcome change, because what we see at the minute with charging units is just, well, you get +1 to the combat res because I charged. It can be good, but also similarly, if like for example in 8th, if I charge you and I've only got a flag and you've got a BSB, then the charge bonus is lost. There is no bonus to that. It is just leveled out. So for me, the +1, it seems like it's going to be +1 initiative on the charge. I mean, it could be more. I could be wrong, but it just says a bonus for charging. So hopefully it'll be good to see that charging now has a real impact. And I think, again, clarification with how you overrun in things like the movement phase or the charging or failed charges will be good clarification. Charging is going to be massively important, I think, unless you have supremely high initiative compared to low initiative. For example, the article specifically references Swordmaster of Hoeth being initiative 6 and Stone Trolls being initiative 1. If a Stone Troll charges a Swordmaster in pretty much every situation, it looks like the Swordmaster's still going to be going first. So it'd be interesting to see how we can whether there'll be spells that drop or increase your initiative. That'll be good. That's going to be good to see if that does come into play. But as it is at the minute, obviously we've only been drip fed certain few magic spells. I'm looking forward to the magic article so we can get a much more concrete view on what we're going to be expecting and what can be coming. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if you get bigger initiative for flanks and rear charges, or whether you get more initiative for charging downhill or having the higher ground, things like that. That's going to be an interesting one to see. Now, it also says again, there's mention to the preternatural senses of the Swordmasters of Hoeth. I wonder if that is in reference to something like Always Strikes First. Now, obviously, we've had no confirmation on Always Strikes First. I don't know if it's going to be there, but you know, how Always Strikes First is going to interact in this edition would be very important, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the dominance of things like elves. I think it's fair to say that elves are very competitive in 8th edition, all of the flavours, because of things like Always Strikes First. So whether Always Strikes First is going to be you just strike first, whether it's going to be an initiative boost, whether it's going to be a reroll, whether it's going to be just ignoring great weapons, it's going to be good to see that one. Now, a big one what we've seen, and I'm really, really pleased to see this, is the to hit chart. Now, it's great to see that back. There was a lot of concerns. Now, I will say I do think the shooting article did put the concerns to rest, but to see it concrete really does make me feel a lot better, is that there is going to be a return to the classic to hit chart. We're not going to have weapon skill 3+ to hit. We're going to have core weapon skill values that are then compared against other weapon skill values. Now, it's interesting, we have seen a change. Obviously, previously, if you were a higher initiative than your opponent in 8th edition, then you would always be hitting on 3s. Now, you could get bonuses and buffs that could get that down to hitting on 2s, but in general, you'd be looking at 3s. Now, the biggest change to the hit chart is that it is possible for you to hit on 2s. Now, for most units in the game, I don't think you're only going to see this. I think you may well see it with high elite infantry, Warriors of Chaos, Swordmasters, Executioners maybe, against things like skeletons or zombies when they're really low initiative. To put it into perspective, if your weapon skill 1, then a weapon skill of 3 or above will hit you on a 2. So I think you're going to see skeletons, zombies getting absolutely punished. But you know, it's one of those things. If you get a lot of zombies and you get a lot of skeletons, so whilst they get hit more, you do get a lot of them. So it'll be interesting to see how that works. But the fact that it goes down to 2s is a big change, and also similarly, it's not as yeah, other than that, it's pretty much the exact same. It's pretty much the exact same. Goes from 2s to 5s. So other than the 2s, obviously that's the big one. The changes to 2s to hit. But as I said, I think outside of elite infantry and outside of characters, I don't think you're really going to see a lot of 2s to hit in general. So whilst that is an interesting change, I think it's quite cool. Now, again, whether there'll be spells that change the way that you hit, or whether you can do more, that's going to be very interesting as well. But now, there is mention, the next part of the article has brought up some debate within a lot of the conversations that I've been in, speaking to a few people. The question is Step Up going to exist in the old world like it did in 8th edition? Now, that obviously, you know, being said, if you are 6 wide and I do 6 wounds to you, you can still do all your attacks back. Whereas without Step Up, if I charge you and go first, do 6 wounds, you can't attack me back. Now, there's been no confirmation. There's mention to removing casualties from the back ranks. Now, it says casualties are removed from the back ranks, representing the rear rank stepping forward as their comrades bite the dirt. Set every death aside, and you can calculate that for combat res. Now, does taking wounds from the back representing models stepping forward, is that confirmation of Step Up? Is that just because taking wounds from the back is much cleaner? You know, no confirmation of Step Up is to quote the Lore Master, very interesting. But I think that it's going to be an important one. It'd be good to see. It'd be good to get some solid confirmation on Step Up and whether that exists or not. Because, you know, obviously the last thing you want is just well, you know, if you get charged, you get no attacks back. It might feel pretty sad, but I suppose with the way that falling back works, which we'll touch on in a moment, and counter charging potentially, then you know it's not the worst thing in the world. It could be good, but yeah, it will be. Yeah, I'm you know, that's the biggest point of debate at the minute, and that's my biggest thought on the phase. Is I love everything that we've seen so far. I think it's fantastic. For me, Step Up is going to be an interesting one. I think Step Up's a really good mechanic, and it's a shame we didn't get some confirmation on the on Step Up, whether it's returning or leaving. But you know, for now, that's going to be a point of debate. I mean, please feel free to share below what your thoughts are and let me know if you think I'm right or if you think I'm wrong. But now, obviously, calculating combat res. Now, the combat res result score is basically the same as it was in 8th edition, which is great. Unsaved wounds are points. Rank for each rank bonus is +1 point. Standard battle standard bearer +1 point, as it always was. A flank charge is an additional +1 point, as it always was. A rear charge is +2, as it always was. Overkill still in, +1 point for every excess wound. Now, obviously, overkill used to have a cap. There isn't mention to a cap in that list. So does overkill now cap? I suppose we'll have to see. But I could see it capping. I think it probably should, because I think that there's the potential for it to be for it to hurt. The last one that is, you know, is the combat results table. There is +1 point for high ground. Now, is that going? I could be wrong here. I might need correcting. But obviously, charging down a hill is worth +1 combat res in 8th edition. It's not used very often, but it is a thing. So I wonder if the high ground basically is just to represent charging down a hill, or if you're on a hill. Now, I suppose, yeah, you could say that high ground is if you're on a hill and someone charges up the hill at you, then do you get the +1 for high ground? I'd assume that you do. So that's an interesting change, which is quite good. But in terms of breaking, once you've added it all up, you will add up all your combat res from both sides, and you see if it's a draw, then combat will continue to next turn. But if there is a clear loser, then the clear loser must take a break test. This is a leadership test modified by how much you lose to combat by, and with several outcomes. Now, it states here, I'm gonna read straight from the article here, because I think this is a little bit confusing, and I've heard a lot of people talk about the confusing side of it. So I'm going to read straight from the article. I'm not going to put my spin on it, and I want you guys to let me know what you think, and I'll let you know what I think when we're done. But now they've said if the natural roll is higher than the unit's leadership stat of the testing unit's leader, either that of its champion or of a hero model that's joined, then the unit breaks. Now, obviously, I suppose where it says a unit's leader, I assume that just means similar to Inspiring Presence, where you'd use the highest leadership in the unit, or Inspiring Presence. Now, there's no mention to Inspiring Presence at this point, so I wonder how Inspiring Presence will interact, if it's even going to be a thing in this edition. So we'll have to see on that one. But it does say that you still would use the highest in the unit, so that's good. Now, a natural roll is higher than the leadership stat of the testing unit's leader, then the unit breaks. So if you're leadership 8 and I roll a 9, then the unit will break. If the modified roll is higher than the unit's leadership stat, but the natural roll is lower, then the unit falls back in good order. And if the modified roll is lower than the leadership stat, or you roll a double 1, then the unit gives ground. So that would be, well, it then says, as you can see, this substantial change to combat rules from the last few editions of Warhammer Fantasy battles, and instead combines and refines a selection of rules from earlier editions and spin-offs of the game. It may seem complex at first glance, but it's a mechanic that quickly becomes clear once you've ran through a few combats, and it adds a ton of tactical depth to the most important parts of the game. Now, my assumption on this would be is that if your natural roll is higher than the unit's leadership test, then the unit breaks and flees. So if you are leadership 8 and I roll a 9, the unit would break and flee. If I am leadership 8, now the second part being if the modified roll is higher than the leadership stat, but the natural is lower, then the unit falls back in good order. To me, that is, if I'm leadership 8 and I lose by 4 and I roll a 5, then that would be a 9. So I would, at that point, fall back in good order. But then if the modified roll is lower than the leadership stat, or you roll a double 1, then the unit gives ground. So obviously at that point I would say that if I'm leadership 8, I lose by 4, and I roll a 3, that's 7. So it'd be lower, so I'd give ground. Now at this point there is, so they've said, yes, so there's like a break test example on the article, where, I mean, this should be coming up on the screen now, which was, you can see a Swordmaster leadership have come off worse in the combat than the Stone Trolls, Spark striking first, and now must take a break test. So you can see there's dice rolls of which you would choose to pick. So I think that will be helpful. I think a lot of people were referring back to that initially for their first few combats, but I think it doesn't. I don't think it's as confusing as it sounds once you get used to it. But that one is going to be interesting. Now, they've said that they're going to be discussing morale breaking and psychology next week. So, we don't know what give ground, fall back with good order, and break and flee is going to look like yet. We'll find that out next week. So, for now, that's as far as we can go with that. But they have said that they're going to look at what pursuit is, which is obviously the final part, the final sub-phase. So, when you win a combat, you have a range of choices. You can restrain, pass leadership tests, and you can reform your ranks for free. Now, that was always as it was in 8th edition. That's not changed. That's cool. Follow up. A unit that gave ground, re-entering combat a few inches forward. So, this sounds to me as if you roll give ground, which would be modified roll of equal to or lower than your leadership, you would step back a few inches, and then they would step back. They would then step into you a few inches, so they're following up into the combat. So the opponent's not fleeing, but also they're not breaking from combat if you don't want them to. So I think that's quite a cool mechanic. I wonder if that following up then won't count as a charge, so you lose the initiative bonus and stuff like that. I think you're probably going to see a lot of fights that go like that. And then finally, obviously, you've got Pursuit. A unit that flees or falls back. If you catch a fleeing unit, it's cut down and destroyed. If you catch a unit falling back, combat begins again, and the pursuer counts as having charged. So, fall back in good order is obviously the modified roll higher than leadership. So, if you pursue a unit that's falling back in good order, then you'll effectively have the same outcome as following up. But obviously, if that unit is fleeing, then I assume that you'll just catch and kill them. And then you've got overrun. Now, in cases of the unit being completely destroyed, then the unit may make a full move directly forward. And if you end up in combat if you end up in another combat, that counts as a fresh charge. Okay, so that's similar, well, exactly the same as how it was in 8th edition. If you overrun and you hit another unit, then it's a fresh charge. So I assume that if you pick, depending on how you pick your combats, then you can fight twice in the same combat phase. if that does exist, if that works. That'd be cool. There's no mention to caps on overruns at this stage, so I think there probably will be, because I think if there's not, then it means things like heavy cavalry could absolutely run rampant through people's back lines if you stack your charges up well. But I think there probably will be a cap, but as it stands, there's no mention to a cap, so that's a moot point right there. But and then obviously there's mention finally to the assailment spells, which we heard from right back way when on the first article of the almanac, where they showed off the different types of spells. Now we have in this instance been given 2 examples of battle spells, one from battle magic and one from dark magic. So it's wizards. So just to confirm, wizards can use assailment spells, for instance, while units fighting from behind a barricade or wall benefit from extra protection. So that's an interesting point. But the spells that we've been shown is Hammer Hand is the first one, which is a battle magic spell. Now it is a casting value of 7. And the range is combat, which the effect of the spell is a single enemy unit the caster is engaged in combat with suffers 2d3 strength 4 hits with an AP of -2. Now that doesn't seem overly powerful. It seems relatively good. I mean, 2d3 strength 4, yeah, that's not bad. It's going to be wounding a lot of things on 4s, maybe 3s. AP of -2, that's going to hurt armour, which is good. So it'd be interesting to see how that spell's going to work. Now, obviously, we haven't had confirmation on step up yet. So would that spell, when you cast it, could that strip people from the front rank and then stop people attacking back? I think, now for me, this is just me just spouting here, I could be wrong, I think this spell could potentially confirm that step up does exist, because I think that if you cast Hammer Hand and you rolled the 2d3 and got double three and got 6 strength 4 hits, if you kill the entire front rank, then, you know, do the rest of your models get to attack? When's the spell cast? Is it cast at the end? There's no real confirmation as to when the spell is actually cast yet. So is it cast at the very start of that combat? Is it cast at the end? If I kill all your front rank with spell, similarly, do my unit then get to punch you? And do you get to punch me back? I don't know. I think the spell could allude to the fact that step up will exist, if that's the case. But I could be wrong. And the second spell they show off is from the law of dark magic. Now I wonder who is going to use dark magic, if humans are going to have access to it, if it's just going to be darker entities, so maybe warriors, vampires, dark elves, demons, those kind of things. It'd be cool to see who's got that. Again, I'm really looking forward to the magic articles, because I'd love to know at this point who and how magic is going to interact, who's going to have it, who's going to have what. So, but the spell is casting value of 7+, same as Hammer Hand. Range combat, same thing. Now, as a single enemy model the caster is engaged in combat with suffers a single strength 3 hit with multiple wounds 3 special rule, and with no armor saves permitted. So, yeah, that seems very good. Certainly seems like it could absolutely heavily hurt, I mean, even straight up just kill characters. If you're invasive, I suppose the risk being that then, if that character just wants to punch you back and kill you, if you failed a spell, you've died for nothing. So that's cool. But it does mention walled and regeneration saves as well, so you can take those as attempted. Now I can't remember or not if we've had confirmation that the regeneration save is going to exist. I think we have, to be fair. But it's cool to see either way that it just straight up ignores armor. But, yeah, so that's the 2 spells they've shown off. I think there's definitely going to be a lot more. I think there's a lot of questions and a lot of food for thought from this article. Now, they've confirmed that next week is going to be morale, psychology, fear, terror, hatred, all that's good stuff, as they say. So, next week's article is going to be interesting. Are we going to see some more? I'm going to see a lot more rules, which is cool. We're going to see how a lot of things interact. We're going to see how pursuing, fleeing, breaking, that kind of stuff works by the looks of it as well. And I think it's going to be a good article next week as well. I mean, I've loved all the articles so far. I feel like they're just getting better and better. And yeah, for me at this stage, I was very pleased with the article today. I think it's really cool. Couple of points, things like step up. I'd love to know how that's going to interact, and spells, how they're going to interact. But for now, I hope you like this video. I hope you liked our initial reaction to this article. And if you think that I'm on the money, or you think that I'm bang on, then please comment below with your agreements. Or if you think that I've completely got this wrong, I don't know what I'm talking about, I can't even read straight from an article, then please also comment below and tell me. But for now, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you'll have a wonderful evening. Head over to triplecrownwargaming.com, where you can become a Knight of the Realm and view the Knights of the Realm mustering ground to see all of our other videos, or just head straight to YouTube and you can see all of our other reaction videos for the Old World so far.
Remember to tag your friends and like, subscribe and share. Then head over to triplecrownwargaming.com and become a Knight of the Realm today.
What are you doing, mate?
You alright? Do it for Warhammer!